Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of the Endless Spiral podcast. You're all very welcome. I am, as always, your host, Keith Russell. On this episode, I am joined by Niamh Orbinski, who is the founder of Nutrition with Niamh. And I'm sure, look, if you've seen her on Instagram. She gives some really good tips and advice on nutrition and well-being and all that type of stuff. Niamh has studied and worked directly in the nutrition and well-being space for over 10 years, and she offers services like nutrition counselling, yoga classes, and workshop. So, Niamh, we'll kick this off. How are you? You're very welcome to come on the podcast today, and I'm delighted that you've been able to give up your time to do this because we were having a chat beforehand, this is kind of very personal and very important topic for me. So you're very welcome, and thanks very much for coming on.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Brilliant, brilliant. Niamh, so I was thinking maybe if you could explain maybe what nutrition counselling is, because maybe some people aren't too familiar with exactly what that topic is.
Yeah. Okay, so nutrition counselling is kind of a blend between a traditional nutrition consult and therapy. So we use a lot of counselling techniques in nutrition counselling rather than it being more descriptive. So if, say, you have an issue that might be related to, let's say, skin health or gut health, you might not need counseling through that. You might just need specific advice to get you through that issue, right? So that kind of approach with nutrition is really important. But when it comes to things like relationship with food, your behaviors around food, your attitudes around food, this is where the counseling comes in, because there's a why underneath the what that we need to get to, and we get there through nutrition counseling. So it's not therapy, but it's not a traditional nutrition consult. It's kind of somewhere in the middle.
Right, okay. Where have you been all my life? For God's sake.
Yeah.
It's taken me 20 years to find you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like I'm doing psychotherapy at the moment. I'm traditionally a nutritionist, but I went back to do psychotherapy a year ago, because as I started migrating from traditional nutrition practice into the nutritional counseling realm, I started to reach out for different ways to improve my expertise when it came to counseling. And then when I started going to therapy myself, I started realizing this is where it needs to go. It's like the nutrition is the main focus, but it needs to be that therapeutic space. And it just naturally started to happen. So then I decided I'm going to need a little bit more skills in the area of psychotherapy and blend them together. And then when I started doing that, results for people just started changing.
Wow, wow. So I had a look on your website. If I started listing all the qualifications you have, I'd be here till next week. You must have about 15 on that website. But
Yeah.
did you do you feel kind of what you do is kind of a niche, or is there, like, do you find that there's loads of different people doing what you do, or do you find so many people come to you saying, well, I can't find anyone else who kind of specializes in what you do?
Yeah, it's very niche. I started moving into this arena about 4 years ago. I'd say I started moving more from traditional practice into this kind of counseling psychology realm, and there was nobody practicing from an intuitive eating approach when I started training back 4 years ago in Ireland. So
Right.
intuitive eating is the framework of what I work within. And that's an evidence-based approach to nutrition that was developed in the States in the 1990s by two dietitians.
Right.
Um, and this is where this term nutrition counselling was kind of bred from. Um, so yeah, it's still a very small niche area in Ireland.
Right, right. And what percentage wise would you find with men and women as clients?
Most of my clients are women.
Yeah.
I have had some men in the past, but these kind of issues around food affect men too. But I feel like men don't reach out because it's seen as a woman's issue.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
And like if we look at eating disorder rates for men now internationally, we actually don't have a lot of data around it. But 1 in 7, I think it is, men will develop some form of an eating disorder by the age of 40. So this is not that men aren't struggling with these issues. It's just that they tend to not reach out before it gets to the stage where their health starts deteriorating. So like if we look at eating disorders on a spectrum, okay, so I don't actually work with active eating disorders. I tend to work with people after they've come through maybe inpatient services
Right.
or maybe before the point of it developing into an eating disorder. So
Right.
you've got intuitive eating on one end, and an intuitive eater, the best way to describe it is a baby. So we're all born intuitive eaters. We all have this skill within us, but we lose this over time as we pick up rules throughout our lives. So maybe we pick up rules in the family, and then we move into school, we pick up some more rules. And then we hit puberty and our sexuality starts to develop. And now we have all of these body ideals that are projected to us from every corner. Um, this affects women more intensely than men, but it affects men too. Um, like all of these, be as lean as possible and be as muscular as possible. All of these ideas that are projected to men are there too, and they do affect men as well. Um, and then that matures over lifetime. You might hear a certain rule or that a certain food, I don't know, helps you look a certain way, and
Mm.
it just snowballs. Um, so that can then lead into disordered eating, which is kind of my area of expertise. And disordered eating could be, counting the calorie in every single thing that passes your lips, or, things like if you walk into a coffee shop and they don't have low fat milk, not buying a coffee. That could be considered a disordered eating trait, or constantly thinking about food all the time. It's not uncommon for
Mm.
my clients to tell me that they think about food 70 to 90% of their day.
Mm.
That doesn't need to be the case. And that's kind of what I work with people to try and pull that number down and place more value on themselves as a person rather than their appearance.
Yeah. So an app like MyFitnessPal is something that you wouldn't recommend, obviously.
No, definitely not. And the reason why is because it's a diet tool. We use it to control. And ironically, the more control we place over our food, the bigger the backlash is. So that might result in binging, or it might result in losing tons of weight, but then falling off the wagon, as we say, putting all the weight back on and more, and then feeling panicky because of all of the messages that we're given in our society, all these fat phobic messages that being
Hmm.
fat is bad.
Hmm.
And then the only way that we know how to fix that is to go back to MyFitnessPal, to go back to the control, and it
Yeah.
just gets deeper and deeper and deeper with every experience that happens like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you find that the advice that you would give men different than women? I know you say most of your clients are women, but would the advice be different?
Not really. I mean, my
No.
approach will be different
Okay.
because, men and women are different beings, but
Yeah.
uh, generally the advice, no. Like I always say to my clients that this is when they work with me, it's a very, all right, it's really important to me at least to try and create a very safe, very non-judgmental, very shame-free space. So when somebody reaches out to me, there's a huge part of confidentiality that's involved because it can be a shameful experience with food, but actually more so with men than it is with women. Women might, they might talk about it with their friends, but men probably won't ever
Yeah.
discuss it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main thing with men is that they want to know that nobody's going to know
All
that
right.
they're working with me in any capacity. It's just between us. It's just in the therapeutic space, so that they can work through it at their own pace. And I think that's the really important thing because of the society that we all live in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, as we were chatting beforehand, I mean, the whole reason why I'm doing this particular episode, and I know it's Men's Health Week and all, which is kind of how I ended up doing that piece for Joe.ie. And as we were saying, like I wrote my own blog then, and I did my own, or I dedicated the last podcast to this particular episode. So anyone who isn't familiar with my story, I suppose I'll give a quick overview. And don't worry, we won't use this episode as like a therapy session for me. I'm just gonna give like a little overview, just to kind of the reason why we're doing this particular topic. So, kind of in my early teens, I started kind of going to the swimming pool to do, life saving classes and stuff like that. And as I kind of said in the blog and the podcast, I know some people might think, well, it might not affect. It's not really that, that's not a big thing, but it was for me, and because of my particular body shape, and I was, because your early teens, you're starting to develop, and you're starting to notice kind of women and girls and all that type of stuff, and that was just traumatizing for me. You had to wear speedos, you couldn't wear shorts, you're in and out of the pool all the time. It was just absolutely demoralizing for me. I was absolutely miserable. And of course, like, that kind of stemmed, or not maybe stemmed, but that kind of developed into went from anxiety to depression. And then as I got older, and even into my 20s, I stopped doing that. But it was kind of imprinted into me then anyway. And that's where the body dysmorphia came from. And like, I just couldn't get into shape. And it was just an obsession with me trying to get a certain body shape that I wanted, because I was so depressed with myself that nothing I could do, I was working for me. And my unhealthy relationship with food and exercise, which is what the blog's called, but that's exactly what it is. So I'm either, even to this day, I'm either all in or I'm all out. There's no middle ground with me. So at the moment, like right today, I'm 2 weeks into kind of a healthy diet. For anyone listening, I'm actually doing the finger thing for quotation marks if you can't see that. So I'm 2 weeks into that, and I'm starting to work out again. I've started doing yoga. I've never done that before, and I'm starting to kind of work out. But I can still feel it there, that even last night I sat down after doing a workout and I'm like, I want something. And it's just controls you. And the more you try and fight it, the more you're trying to think, right, what can I have that's not going to be too bad? And the days that I don't work out is worse. The days I do work out, I'm kind of thinking, well, I won't have anything, because I don't want to ruin the work I've done. Do you know what I mean? And it's a spiral then. It's like, as you said earlier on, there's always a relapse for me. So I'm either in great shape or I'm 3 stone overweight. And then my head is gone. I'm mentally drained. I'm miserable. Depression kicks in. And it's just something I've found that men just aren't talking about. As you said, most of your clients are women. So that is kind of basically an overview. That wasn't really a short story. That's more the long version. But that is kind of an overview of my story, kind of why I want to do this particular topic. So, I mean, what would you say, I mean, for men, like, how can we get men to come forward? Like, as we were speaking beforehand, the stigma that men seem to have. Well, not just, I mean, as when men hear the words eating disorder, I think they think, I'm not speaking for everyone, I think they think anorexia or maybe bulimia or something like that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just say, Keith, that this is not just you.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you that you're experiencing this. I see this every day of the week, multiple times a day, the same story that you just described there. And I'm sure there's people listening that resonate deeply with that, whether they are male or female. And there's a reason why I see client after client after client with the same story. And that's, as you described, that all or nothing, that pressure to look a certain way and to be a certain way. And when we try to control it, it results in this backlash because it's human psychology. Like, think about in the last few weeks, what Dublin City has been like, okay, at the weekends. And now that the restaurants are starting to open, we've been restricted for 6 months since Christmas, let's say. And once we get that little bit of freedom, we go all out. Okay, it's the all or nothing approach. The same thing happening here. And until that the threat of future restriction is removed, and by that I mean no more lockdowns, that is going to continue. So this is where our previous restrictive history and the threat of future restrictions results in this backlash of being like, feck it, I'm going to have all of the chocolate. I can't have 2 squares, I have to have 10. Things like that. And until we remove all of this restriction, that will continue to happen. So we need to get off this binge restrict cycle. Back to your question about men, I think that reaching out before it gets to the stage of an eating disorder is kind of the best plan of action. So that might be, it might be listening to a podcast like this. It might be reading a blog post or reading a book. It doesn't have to mean moving straight into one-to-one nutrition counselling. There's lots of other ways that you can start improving your relationship with food before going full welly, if that feels a little bit too scary for people. And like I say disordered eating, but like if we look at disordered eating rates, we actually don't have much stats when it comes to men, unfortunately, because men don't reach out. But with women, if you have 4 friends, 2 to 3 out of those 4 women will have some level of disordered eating. Now, I'm guessing that the rates are probably not as high in men, but they're probably, close enough to that number.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all get the same messages.
Yeah. I mean, for me anyway, it's like, it's never ending. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I can feel myself now, even I'm 2 weeks into it, and I know that I'll have a relapse. And even saying that, I know I'm going to have relapse. It's nearly like I've nearly convinced myself already that I'm going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's kind of, everyone is different, but like, I have it written down in front of me here because I saw you on another video or another podcast you were doing, and you mentioned something about genetics, where 70 to 80% of people's weight
Your
are
weight.
genetics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's crazy.
Yeah. So like if 70% of your weight is determined by your genes and 80% of your height is determined by your genes. But if I came out tomorrow and said, my goal for this summer is to increase my height by an inch, like I'd be laughed out of the place. But yet we do this with weight, and this is where all of the problems come from when we look at disordered eating rates and eating disorder rates, which have hugely increased in the last few years. Because we're sold this story that we can change and morph our body size and our body shape to whatever size we want to be, which is just not true. And we get on this constant wheel of striving to look a certain way. And the only way that we know how to do that is to kill ourselves in the gym and make sure that we're eating a certain way. But then because of human psychology, that just doesn't last. Like if we look at dieting statistics, right? A diet is anything that restricts what, when, or how much you eat, which is a lot of things. So it can be very obvious diets like, juice fasts or keto or Atkins, things that we know are diets, but it can also be subtle things like, maybe I won't have carbs at one meal during the day, or maybe I will only have a certain amount of calories at breakfast and lunch and a certain amount of calories in the evening time. Or maybe I'll have a certain calorie limit from Monday to Friday, and then I allow myself an extra calorie limit at the weekend. This is still a diet because it's still putting a restriction on your food. So about 95% of diets result in weight gain, either partial weight gain of the weight that is lost, or all of the weight coming back and more within 4 years. So 4 to 5 years is usually the studies that we look at. And we don't have one study, like not one, that shows us that through intentional weight loss, we can keep the weight off for 4 years or more.
Wow. Christ. Not one
Not
study.
Not one. But yet we're sold this story all the time of this prescription of weight loss. We're given this prescription, but weight is not a behavior. It's like putting the horse before the cart before the horse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thinking of it. Yeah. So we should be looking at health promoting behaviors and looking at body acceptance and accepting your here and now body, and which the body image is a whole other piece of work that I do with my clients as well. Because it's really hard to reject the diet mentality, which is the first principle of intuitive eating, if we have this self-loathing for our here and now body. So if we can try to allow this sense of respect for our here and now body, it can help us to move away from all of the counting, all of the rules, and move towards a place of gentle and compassionate care towards food and towards our body.
Okay. So are you saying that, I mean, it's everything's in moderation? Is that what you mean, or am I going off topic there?
No, not at all. Yes, although sometimes everything in moderation can be seen as a rule too.
So it's still a restriction. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything in moderation is fine as long as that's flexible too. That statement also needs to be flexible. So I try and help people move from rigidity and restriction to flexibility and fluidity.
Right.
So most of the time I have vegetables at every meal. Most of the time I get movement into my daily life. Most of the time I eat well. Things like this, like putting this most of the time phrase in front of things helps us to be a little bit more flexible around food. So I describe it, Keith, like, it's kind of complex work in itself because you're working through the mind, but it's like if you move into a new home, okay, and one of the rooms needs to be completely renovated. And there's 10 layers of wallpaper on the wall. So each one of these layers of wallpaper is similar to like every rule that you've picked up over your lifetime of how you should be and what you should eat. And what we do through nutrition counselling and through intuitive eating is to slowly peel back those layers one by one in a way that feels comfortable for that person that we're working with until we get that bare wall.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we fill in the cracks and we paint back over it. So going on just another diet or another plan is like not bothering to take down the layers of wallpaper and just putting a layer of paint on top of it. It's eventually going to start peeling at the edges. It won't look that great. It's probably going to last you, maybe a year, two. But it's not going to solve the problem. Whereas you remove the wallpaper, you fill in the cracks, and you've kind of fixed it.
Yeah. That's really good. I like that. Very good. We'll wrap this up fairly soon because I don't like the podcast to go on for too long, because I kind of like to kind of keep them nice and short for people to kind of listen to them on the go. I'm just reading something like you have some phrases up on your website, and there's one I really liked. I just have it written down here. It's time you found well-being without the obsession. That's really, really good, because it's the obsession that, for me anyway, it's the obsession that kills you. It's just not. It's not sustainable.
No, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
I see it every day of the week, and I see people like honestly believe they will never get rid of that voice in the head, that obsession. And every single person that I've worked with comes through to the other side. It's just that it requires a lot of trust in that process. It really doesn't have to be that way. I mean, that percentage that I mentioned, about 70 to 90% of your brain space being taken up thinking about food, you can pull that right back down to somewhere around 30%, which is pretty average, thinking about what am I going to have for dinner? Do I have food in the house? Just really basic thoughts that we need to have to survive. But all of this obsession around food, it seems normal because we see it so much in our culture, but it doesn't have to be like that. And we can live a really full life and a healthy life without having that obsession.
Yeah. And then another thing just exactly ties into what you're saying is just something else I saw on your website was not falling apart if you don't get to the gym, which is something that I usually, like, I'd get if I couldn't get to the gym, I'd get in such a bad mood or even get to do any workout. You'd be so stressed about it because you're kind of like, oh my God, it's another day. I can't let this day go. And because if I don't work out, I might feel that I'm going to start eating unhealthy because, and you're just kind of caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, it's that all or nothing mentality that's coming in.
Mm,
And this is something I talk about all the time, of trying to remove that all or nothing mentality and just apply this most of the time mentality.
yeah,
You know, because
yeah.
our energy states are not the same. You know, some days we'll be super tired. We won't be able to get to the gym. That's okay. What else can I do for myself right now that would make me feel well? So it might be 10 minutes of a yoga stretch, Keith. You know, looking up a YouTube channel and just
Mm,
to move your body, to focus on movement and joy in movement rather than I have to get to the gym and I have to do an hour and I have to go balls
mm,
to the wall and da 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 da. It's all very militant and we just can't keep up with that because life will throw us things that
yeah,
mean that that just can't happen for us every day.
exactly, exactly. And I mean, like, and for, like, just for me anyway, like I've got one of these Apple Watch things, and like you've got the, you know, it's like a Fitbit. You know, you're tracking your
Mm,
calories and you're tracking your workout. So you're doing your workout thinking, well, I didn't do that yesterday, or I need to do this today. And if I don't get to the gym today, or if I don't do a workout today, you know all this, and it's
yeah.
just, it's, I suppose it's just so much up in, as you said, it's up in your head. I mean,
Mm,
and what I've been trying to do now, especially with the yoga, like I said here before we came on, I've never done yoga in my life, and I've been
mm,
doing 2 weeks or a week and a half of it now. But I'm kind of trying to train myself to work out for my mental health, not work out
mm,
to lose weight. I'm not working out
mm-hmm,
to have a certain body shape. Well, I'm
mm,
not assuming, but I'm kind of hoping that'll be a byproduct of it. But it's
mm,
not my priority now. I'm just
mm,
trying to work out from my headspace, and
mm.
I'm just trying that because, as I said earlier, for me it was always an obsession for the body dysmorphia. That was a way of me trying to fix it, I suppose, is probably a
Yeah,
simpler way of putting it.
yeah. I would encourage you, Keith, to try and tap into how movement makes you feel. So, do you feel more energized? Does your mind feel clearer? Do you sleep better? You know, how is your mood afterwards? So when
Yeah,
those thoughts about, I wonder how many calories I burnt today, and I wonder, do I need to go harder today, or could I go harder tomorrow? Those thoughts will come. They've been there for years, but try to bring it back to how do I feel in my body during and after movement, and then let that guide you. And think about, you just, I'm not going to ask you here in a podcast, but think about what would it be like for you to remove the Fitbit or to remove the Apple Watch, and just explore that in your own mind.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I actually did a workout yesterday, and I didn't wear the watch
Mm,
purposely. I didn't wear it, and then I was stressed, not stressed, but I was a bit anxious afterwards because I was kind of like, I haven't tracked that workout. Have I
yeah,
burnt as many calories that I did the
yeah.
last time I did that workout? Do you know? And it's just,
hmm
yeah, yeah,
hmm So
yeah.
I would, this is, and this, remember I mentioned the control?
Mm,
We feel like the more control we place over it, then the more control we get, but actually the opposite happens. So just maybe remembering that when those anxious feelings come in, that um, putting more control makes the backlash greater as well, because there will
yeah,
be an opposite reaction to everything.
yeah. Okay, we'll try that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe we'll wrap this up, guys, because I've had my little therapy session, so we can go now. Um, well, as I always do, we're kind of towards the end of the podcast. I always kind of let the guest have the final word. So, I've already read a little kind of bit off your website, but do you have any words of advice or little words of wisdom that you kind of want to share with people?
Mm-hmm. Um, I think based on what we were talking about is to try and tap into how food and movement makes you feel in your body. So even if there is lots of control around food, can you place some mindful awareness to how you feel after certain meals and how you feel after certain movements, and allow the answers that you get from asking yourself that question to guide your future food and movement choices.
Brilliant. Okay. Really, really good. Niamh, before we go, do you want to let everyone know how they can get in contact with you, on your website and your Instagram, if anyone has any questions for you?
Yeah. So it's super simple. You can find me at nutritionwithniamh.com or at nutritionwithniamh on Instagram.
Brilliant. Well done. Brilliant.
Okay.
Niamh, thanks very much for coming on the podcast today. That was really,
No
really
problem.
helpful. And hopefully it's helped some people. And look, this podcast for everyone, obviously. But listen, guys, if you need to reach out, just send myself a message, contact Niamh, find somebody else. You're not alone. You're not on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, I have been silent for too long on this, and it's not a little, it's been massively helpful for me. Very therapeutic as well, to kind of being able to share my struggles with stuff. So listen, guys, please just reach out. You're not alone. We'll leave there, guys. We will have another podcast coming up next week. But for now, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.